Think about the kind of mind it takes to rule the cosmos, to hold the power to incinerate entire cities, redirect rivers, command the sky itself, and demand that everything underneath it bows. The story we usually hear paints him as a savior. His father, Cronus, famously swallowed his children whole to prevent a prophecy of his own downfall. Zeus, the youngest, escaped, sliced open his father's stomach, and pulled his siblings back from the dark. He then led those siblings in the Titanomachy, a grueling 10-year cosmic war. They fought to drag the universe out of savage chaos and impose a permanent, structured order. But surviving a decade of brutal warfare and tasting absolute authority changed the dynamic. As the dust settled, Zeus looked at his newly rescued brothers and sisters, figures like Poseidon and Hades, who actually had a stronger claim to the throne, and he saw rivals rather than family. The moment the war ended, the unity of the siblings fractured into a rigid hierarchy. Zeus had led the charge, and he intended to stay at the summit, establishing a system of control designed to ensure none of his peers could ever rise to meet him. To maintain that new throne, Zeus relied first on raw, overwhelming violence. The ancient Greeks attributed the most destructive forces of nature to him, specifically the lightning bolt he kept permanently gripped in his hand. That violence was immediately tested. Gaia, the earth itself, produced Typhon, a massive reptilian monster with 100 serpentine heads that flashed malevolent fire from its eyes. Faced with a roar that sounded like a menagerie of wild animals, Zeus unleashed a barrage of thunderbolts, shook the planet, scorched the earth, and blasted the creature straight down into the abyssal pit of Tartarus. Later myths even claimed the monster's burning breath is what still fuels the eruptions of Mount Etna in Sicily today. Crushing a physical challenger secured the borders of his kingdom, but physical force has limits. It cannot silence a rumor or stop a prophecy, forcing Zeus to develop much darker methods of control. The real terror keeping him awake at night was the pattern of history. Uranus fell to Cronus, Cronus fell to Zeus. Then the fates delivered a prophecy. A son of his own bloodline would rise, and he would be greater than the father. The mother of this theoretical child was his first wife, the Titaness Medes. She was the literal embodiment of wisdom and deep thought, the woman who helped him rise to power in the first place. But under the weight of his paranoia, she ceased to be a partner and became a vessel for his own destruction. You can't incinerate fate with a lightning bolt. Instead, Zeus initiated a deceptive game, challenging Medes to use her divine abilities to shift into different animals. He convinced her to transform her into a fly, and the moment she did, he snatched her out of the air and swallowed her whole, attempting to absorb her intellect and permanently end the threat to his bloodline. A god willing to literally consume his own pregnant wife to cheat his destiny is a far more dangerous entity than a warrior throwing thunderbolts. His true weapon was a calculating mind that viewed everyone, even family, as expendable. With his position secured, he turned his attention to ruling the newly ordered universe. For the mortals down on Earth, he demanded absolute dependency, preferring subjects kneeling in the mud, shivering and afraid, over a self-sufficient humanity. Zeus responded to Prometheus's gift of fire with a punishment that abandoned any pretense of justice, choosing instead to make a horrifying example of his former ally. He ordered Prometheus chained to a jagged rock, where his liver would be torn open by an eagle every single day for eternity. This was a gruesome, eternal billboard erected for the entire cosmos, broadcasting a simple message: do not attempt to rise. That same terror applied to his own family. He kept powerful siblings like Hades, Poseidon, and his queen Hera deeply marginalized, enforcing his will through constant intimidation and humiliation whenever they stepped out of line. This reliance on public torture and the constant intimidation of his peers reveals a deep-seated fragility, the behavior of a ruler who cannot coexist with equals. Centuries later, the gleaming peak of Mount Olympus was no longer a home for a triumphant family. It had degraded into a cold, dysfunctional battlefield of silent resentment. Hera's heart had hardened into ice from eons of betrayal. Poseidon abandoned the halls entirely, preferring the deep ocean. And Hades, the eldest brother cheated out of his birthright, locked the heavy gates of the underworld and refused to speak to him. The King of Kings sat at the head of a massive table, surrounded by empty chairs. He was completely supreme, untouchable by prophecy, and entirely safe from being overthrown. Yet he sat alone, tightly clutching his lightning bolts like security blankets. By cutting every moral corner and sacrificing everyone who loved him to avoid the fate of his father, he successfully defeated the monsters of the old world. But when he finally looked in the mirror, a monster was staring right back. But Zeus wasn't the only god shaped by this deeply toxic family history. To understand what happened to the brother he cheated, the one who locked himself away in the dark, click the video on screen now and subscribe to dive deeper into the underworld.